Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This presentation is going to be a little bit shorter than usual. I'll be covering the letter that was written to President Trump by Bishop Carlo Mario Vigano. And boy, is this thing deep. This is for those who subscribe to this channel and for those who maybe do not subscribe to this channel, but they are awake to the controllers behind the scenes, the sun worshippers, the Illuminati, the Jesuits, the Masons, or simply the mystery schools, as they are known as a whole. If you aren't completely sure of what it is I'm speaking of here, please take a little time to watch the first 3 videos on this channel: The Brotherhood of the Snake, Mystery Babylon, Sun Worship, and The Dawn of Man. Those videos lay out who they are and what they believe in and why. Now, let's first find out who exactly is Cardinal Carlo Maria Vigano. We will now go over some of his basic information. Carlo Maria Vigano was born January 16, 1941 in Varese, Italy. Vigano was ordained a priest on March 24, 1968. He earned a doctorate in both canon and civil law. He entered the diplomatic service of the Holy See in 1973, and he worked at the papal diplomatic missions in Iraq and Great Britain. So a lawyer first and then a politician, so to speak, for the Vatican. It is a city-state in and of itself, after all. He was a quote-unquote diplomat from 1978 to 1989. He held posts at the Secretariat of State. In 2009, Vigano was appointed Secretary General of the Vatican City Governorate. In that role, he established centralized accounting procedures and accountability for cost overruns that helped turn a $10.5 million deficit for the city-state into a surplus of $44 million in just 1 year. So a lawyer first, then a politician, and then a banker. I'd like to point out that a $10.5 million loss turned into a $44 million surplus is quite a turnaround for 1 year with regard to percentages. Budgets like those usually take a few years to turn around without very drastic measures, but Vigano did not impose such. I suspect that this can be viewed as an example of what happens when an honest person takes over control of a budget from a dishonest person and eliminates the fraud. This is reason number 1 why Vigano is disliked by the establishment controllers. In January 2016, Cardinal Vigano submitted his resignation as required when he turned 75 years old. But he couldn't stay quiet about the things he knew. He was probably one of the few left in the Vatican who actually still had a conscience. On August 25, 2018, Vigano released an 11-page letter describing a series of warnings to the Vatican regarding Cardinal Theodore McCarrick. Here is that pedophile right here. 2 months earlier, in June 2018, it had been publicly revealed that pedophile McCarrick had abused a minor as well as multiple adult seminarians. As a result, he resigned as a cardinal, and he was forbidden by Pope Francis from leaving the grounds where he was residing, and also from celebrating Mass in public, pending the results of a canonical trial. According to Vigano's letter, in 2000, Gabriel Montalvo, then nuncio to the United States, had informed the Vatican of McCarrick's, quote, gravely immoral behavior with seminarians and priests, end quote. Subsequently, Vigano alleges that Pietro Sambi, nuncio from 2005 to 2011, informed the Vatican again before Vigano himself wrote his own memo regarding pedophile McCarrick in 2016. However, according to Vigano, nothing was done to stop McCarrick. Vigano says that in 2007, he wrote a second memo that included material from clerical sexual abuse expert Richard Sipe. Vigano says that this led Pope Benedict XVI to, in 2009 or 2010, to place severe restrictions on McCarrick's movements and public ministry, not allowing him to venture beyond the seminary grounds where he was living, and not permitting him to say Mass in public. Nevertheless, according to Vigano, Pope Francis removed these sanctions and made McCarrick, quote, his trusted counselor, end quote. Even though Francis knew from at least June 23, 2013, that McCarrick was a serial predator. He knew that he was a corrupt man. He covered for him to the bitter end. I'm not sure about you, ladies and gentlemen, but if I were the Pope, I wouldn't have McCarrick or anyone else who'd been involved in sexual abuse of a minor near me, whether it were true or not, especially in this era of Vatican sexual abuse allegations rampant. Horrible judgment, in my opinion, from someone who is supposed to be smart and have godlike judgment, don't you think? Now, dear listeners, in case you weren't sure about Viganos' allegations, all one must do is check what the sun worshiper-controlled media is saying about it. The New York Times stated that Viganos' letter contained, quote, unsubstantiated allegations and personal attacks, and described it as, quote, an extraordinary public declaration of war against Francis, end quote. Confirmation number 1. The Associated Press characterized Vigano as a, quote, conservative whose hardline anti-gay views are well known, and said the letter, quote, reads in part like a homophobic attack on Francis and his allies. Confirmation number 2. The Los Angeles Times quoted Villanova University professor of theology Massimo Fagioli. He said, quote, this letter has everything to do with factions in the church that are vying for power and influence. You have a convergence of interests that is making this a huge mess in the U.S. Catholic Church. Confirmation number 3. Cardinal Daniel DiNardo, president of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, released a statement declaring that Viganos' letter raised questions which, quote, deserve answers that are conclusive and based on evidence. Without those answers, innocent men may be tainted by false accusations, and the guilty may be left to repeat sins of the past. As far as the Popa, asked by a reporter to respond to Viganos' allegations, Pope Francis replied, I read the statement this morning, and I must tell you sincerely that I must say this to you, the reporter, and all those who are interested. Read the statement carefully and make your own judgment. I will not say a single word about this. I believe the statement speaks for itself, and you have the journalistic capacity to draw your own conclusions. It's an act of faith. When some time passes and you have drawn your conclusions, I may speak, but I would like your professional maturity to do the work for you. It will be good for you. Arrogant, my friends. I guess when you can't talk your way out of something, when you can't give a reasonable explanation about something, you ignore it and you wait for it to slowly fade away. Same MO being used by politicians, like, for instance, blackface wearer Governor Northrop of Virginia. A quick apology, then use of the cabal-controlled media and the so-called journalists, and you don't ever talk about it again. And then, if it ever does come up again, years later, they use the Joe Biden method and claim that the story is so old and has already been quote-unquote debunked. Oh yes, dear listeners, once you can see it, you can never unsee it. The point of all this info on the Cardinal first is to establish that he is not part of the cabal, the sun worshippers, the Satan worshippers, the pedophiles. And when you aren't with them, as you've heard on this channel before, well, you are against them. Establishing this fact lends more credence to the Cardinal's letter written to Trump, of which I will read now. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to listen to what the Cardinal has to say here. I want you all to really, really listen up here. About when he speaks about who it is that we are fighting against. Think the mystery schools. Those whom I and many have been preaching about for some time. The real powers behind the thrones. I will interrupt this letter 3 or 4 times in order to interject some things. June 7th, 2020, Holy Trinity Sunday. Mr. President, in recent months we have been witnessing the formation of two opposing sides that I would call biblical: the children of light and the children of darkness. The children of light constitute the most conspicuous part of humanity, while the children of darkness represent an absolute minority. And yet, the former are the object of a sort of discrimination which places them in a situation of moral inferiority with respect to their adversaries, who often hold strategic positions in government, in politics, in the economy, and in the media. In an apparently inexplicable way, the good are held hostage by the wicked and by those who help them either out of self-interest or fearfulness. The two sides, which have a biblical nature, follow the clear separation between the offspring of the woman and the offspring, ladies and gentlemen, listen up here, of the serpent. The offspring of the serpent. Continuing. On the one hand, there are those who, although they have 1,000 defects and weaknesses, are motivated by the desire to do good and to be honest, to raise a family, to engage in work, to give prosperity to their homeland, to help the needy, and, in obedience to the law of God, to merit the kingdom of heaven. On the other hand, there are those who serve themselves, who do not hold any moral principles, who want to demolish the family and the nation, exploit workers to make themselves unduly wealthy, foment internal divisions and wars, and accumulate power and money. For them, the fallacious illusion of temporal well-being will one day, if they do not repent, yield to the terrible fate that awaits them, far from God, in eternal damnation. In society, Mr. President, these two opposing realities coexist as eternal enemies, just as God and Satan are eternal enemies. And it appears that the children of darkness, whom we may easily identify with the deep state, which you wisely oppose and which is fiercely waging war against you in these days, have decided to show their cards, so to speak, by not revealing their plans. They seem to be certain of already having everything under control, that they have laid aside that circumspection that until now had at least partially concealed their true intentions. The investigations already underway will reveal the true responsibility of those who managed the COVID emergency, not only in the area of healthcare, but also in politics, the economy, and the media. We will probably find that in this colossal operation of social engineering, there are people who have decided the fate of humanity, arrogating to themselves the right to act against the will of citizens and the representatives in the governments of nations. We will also discover that the riots in these days were provoked by those who, seeing that the virus is inevitably fading and that the social alarm of the pandemic is waning, necessarily have had to provoke civil disturbances, because they would be followed by repression, which, although legitimate, could be condemned as an unjustified aggression against the population. The same thing is also happening in Europe in perfect synchrony. It is quite clear that the use of street protests is instrumental to the purpose of those who would like to see someone elected in the upcoming presidential elections who embodies the goals of the deep state and who expresses those goals faithfully and with conviction. Joe Biden. It will not be surprising if, in a few months, we learn once again that hidden behind these acts of vandalism and violence were those who hope to profit from the dissolution of the social order so as to build a world without freedom. Salve et coagula, as the Masonic adage teaches. Dear listeners, this last sentence is absolutely mind-blowing to me, and just might also be to you, my fellow truth seekers. Cardinal Viganos stated earlier in this letter that, quote, We will probably find that in this colossal operation of social engineering, there are people who have decided the fate of humanity, arrogating to themselves the right to act against the will of citizens and their representatives in the governments of nations. Then he tells us who they are. Quote, "It will not be surprising if, in a few months, we learn once again that hidden behind these acts of vandalism and violence, there are those who hope to profit from the dissolution of the social order so as to build a world without freedom. Solve et coagula, as the Masonic adage teaches." Ladies and gentlemen, I don't even know where to start here. Solve et coagula is an unbelievable choice of words. Remember now that this guy has 2 law degrees and was a diplomat, and he knows full well the power of words and what words to use and when. He, like most lawyers and politicians, chooses his words very wisely. Solve et coagula is the motto of the ancient alchemists, those who could control the elements, as this motto pointed to an alchemist's most important operation, that is, solve or salutio, refers to the breaking down of elements, and coagula refers to their coming together. In the process of transmuting base metal into gold or arriving at the philosopher's stone, this contained both literal and hidden meaning. Esoterically, solve referred to the dissolving of hardened positions, negative states of body and mind, therefore dissolving and vanishing negative energetic charge. Coagula referred to the coagulation of dispersed elements into an integrated whole, representing the new synthesis. Solve et coagula expresses transmutation from base to a finer state, the perpetual goal of spiritual growth and human evolution. So, the real and original meaning of these 3 words, solve et coagula, is the formula that the alchemists used to effect this transformation. It could be described as a process where something is broken down to its elements, a process which produces energy that compels reconstitution into a purer form. The online resource freemasonrywatch.org states that the goat of Mendes, or Baphomet, whom the Templars worshipped, is a goat-headed deity, being formed of both male and female principles. One arm points up and one down, with the Latin solve et coagula written on them. And on a side note, ladies and gentlemen, author J.K. Rowling from Lord of the Rings fame also has this tattooed on her arm. And I just thought you all should know that. And finally, that last part of that sentence of his that I read, solve et coagula, as the Masonic adage teaches. Dear listeners, I need not say any more. These words, what this cardinal said here, is self-explanatory. Confirmation, ladies and gentlemen. Confirmation of who it is that we've been fighting against for so long. Continuing from the letter. Although it may seem disconcerting, the opposing alignments I have described are also found in religious circles. There are faithful shepherds who care for the flock of Christ, but there are also mercenary infidels who seek to scatter the flock and hand the sheep over to be devoured by ravenous wolves. It is not surprising that these mercenaries are allies of the children of darkness and hate the children of light. Just as there is a deep state, there is also a deep church that betrays its duties and forswears its proper commitments before God. Thus the invisible enemy, whom good rulers fight against in public affairs, is also fought against by good shepherds in the ecclesiastical sphere. It is a spiritual battle which I spoke about in my recent appeal, which was published on May 8th. For the first time, the United States has in you a president who courageously defends the right to life, who is not ashamed to denounce the persecution of Christians throughout the world, who speaks of Jesus Christ and the right of citizens to freedom of worship. Your participation in the March of Life, and more recently, your proclamation of the month of April as National Child Abuse Prevention Month, are actions that confirm which side you wish to fight on. And I dare to believe that both of us are on the same side in this battle, albeit with different weapons. Quickly, ladies and gentlemen, Cardinal Viganos says, quote, "For the first time, the U.S. has in you a president who courageously defends the right to life." For the first time, dear listeners, I'm not sure what to think of this. Back to the letter. For this reason, I believe that the attack to which you were subjected after your visit to the National Shrine of St. John Paul II is part of the orchestrated media narrative which seeks not to fight racism and bring social order, but to aggravate dispositions, not to bring justice, but to legitimize violence and crime, not to serve the truth, but to favor one political faction. And it is disconcerting that there are bishops, such as those whom I recently denounced, who by their words prove that they are aligned on the opposing side. They are subservient to the deep state, to globalism, to aligned thought, to the New World Order, which they invoke ever more frequently in the name of universal brotherhood, which has nothing Christian about it, but which evokes the Masonic ideals of those who want to dominate the world by driving God out of the courts, out of the schools, out of families, and perhaps even out of churches. Folks, if you still don't believe that the Illuminati, the Masons, the mystery schools are behind the establishment of a new world order, simply reread that last paragraph. Rewind it and listen again. Confirmation of what we've all known, some of us for some time now. Vigano continued, "The American people are mature and have now understood how much the mainstream media does not want to spread the truth, but seeks to silence and distort it, spreading the lie that is useful for the purposes of their masters. However, it is important that the good, who are the majority, wake up from their sluggishness and do not accept being deceived by a minority of dishonest people with unavowable purposes. It is necessary that the good, the children of light, come together and make their voices heard. What more effective way is there to do this, Mr. President, than by prayer, asking the Lord to protect you, the United States, and all of humanity from this enormous attack of the enemy? Before the power of prayer, the deceptions of the children of darkness will collapse. Their plots will be revealed. Their betrayal will be shown. Their frightening power will end in nothing, brought to light and exposed for what it is, an infernal deception. Mr. President, my prayer is constantly turned to the beloved American nation, where I had the privilege and honor of being sent by Pope Benedict XVI as Apostolic Nuncio. In this dramatic and decisive hour for all of humanity, I am praying for you and also for all those who are at your side in the government of the United States. I trust that the American people are united with me and you in prayer to Almighty God. United against the invisible enemy of all humanity. I bless you and the First Lady, the beloved American nation, and all men and women of goodwill. Carlo Mario Vigano, titular Archbishop of Upenia, former Apostolic Nuncio to the United States of America." Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think that the coronavirus was the invisible enemy that the President said we were engaged in fighting against. If you enjoyed this presentation, please like, share, and subscribe. And please consider supporting this channel on Patreon. The link is in the description. Thank you for watching.